rather notoriously when Andrew Klavan, and you just referenced it, talking about Magnus Hirschfeld and his institute being burned to the ground. You know, this Jewish pervert happens to be Jewish pervert. Out of context, meaning that you stripped that I mentioned 4 Christians in that exact same monologue. 4 Christians. That I was talking about psychology and the fact that it was created by a lot of perverts. And I talked about 4 Christians before I got to Magnus Hirschfeld. How do you just completely strip that out and pretend that this was a monologue about Jewish people?
Candace Owens did a debate on her YouTube channel with Amy Kozak, who it seems like he's kind of one of those people whose whole profession is just calling other people anti-Semitic on camera and trying to explain why these people are anti-Semitic. Candace Owens has had a run-in with a lot of these people, Ben Shapiro, Andrew Klavan, a ton of these people from the Daily Wire, and Candace Owens has been trying to seek them out to sit down and debate them and have a conversation like, why are you calling me these names? Is it like, what exactly have I said that makes you want to call me these things, label me these istophobes like the left does with everything? But Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire and people like Amy Kozak and a ton of other people have been labeling Candace Owens these things. Candace Owens has been dying to have someone sit down and just ask them why. Like, what is your explanation for this? And this debate definitely did get heated, where Amy Kozak straight up calls Candace Owens an anti-Semite, and Candace Owens is forced to defend herself. Let's get into this clip here from the Candace Owens YouTube channel of this debate between Candace Owens and Amy Kozak. I thought it was great. Let's watch a couple of these clips.
They is a word, and I have a right to use it.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. I'm talking about, in specifically when you're talking about a Jewish person that you feel that you've clashed with, and then jump from that to say, what's really going on here? And not focusing on the actions of individual people, but to say, I'm just going to say it like there's Jewish gangs out there, or I'm just going to say it like this pattern of focusing on, no, not a lot of people know that in Nazi Germany, when they were burning books, the first book they burned was a Jewish pedophile. Was that not something you talked about on the show?
That was.
So I'm just saying, in an isolated context of if we're having an academic discussion about certain things in history, I can understand wanting to be able to cover everything. But, I'll give you an example. Like,
if you enjoy content like this, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. It really does help me out a ton. Let's get back to the video.
Remember the incident you had with Ted Lieu, where he deliberately took you out of context to make you look guilty of saying something you didn't say? And I thought that was despicable. Like, it was so obvious what he was doing at the time. But I think sometimes what you're doing, perhaps inadvertently, is in resenting being taken out of context to make yourself look guilty, you take yourself out of context to make yourself look innocent.
Yeah,
and say,
but I don't take myself out of context. I say an entire episode of what I want to say very plainly, and then I'm taking out of context because I think that after October 7th, a lot of people have grown hysterical, and they're looking for every time you talk about a Jewish person. Case in point, obviously, rather notoriously, when Andrew Klavan, and you just referenced it, talking about Magnus Hirschfeld and his institute being burned to the ground. This Jewish pervert happens to be Jewish pervert. Out of context, meaning that you stripped that I mentioned 4 Christians in that exact same monologue. 4 Christians. That I was talking about psychology and the fact that it was created by a lot of perverts. And I talked about 4 Christians before I got to Magnus Hirschfeld. How do you just completely strip that out and pretend that this was a monologue about Jewish people? Actually, what's really happening is that you are defending Jewish people because every time you hear a Jewish name, you think that you somehow have a right to defend it. And to the second point, and I'll tell you what really bothers me about this, when you say you're talking about Jewish gangs have always existed in America. So I don't know why this is like suddenly something that we're going, you can't say that there could plausibly be a Jewish gang. Yeah. You know who else has always existed? Black gangs. I talked about it regularly all throughout BLM, talked about gangs.
That's fine though. You can talk about any group of people except for this one. And if you ever have anything to say, that anything that's not 100% positive about Ben Shapiro's favorite group of people like Ben Shapiro, Amy Kozak, Andrew Klavan, these guys will go after you. Like, the stuff that Andrew Klavan was saying about Candace Owens was wild. It's crazy that Andrew Klavan could just make up all these things about Candace Owens, take her out of context over and over and over again. It was like he was posting daily shows about Candace Owens and why she's such a horrible person and why she's an anti-Semite and all these things, trying his absolute best to get on Ben Shapiro's good side. We all know that's what it is. I do episodes, I do videos on, a lot of clips that come from the backstage podcast that they do with Ben Shapiro and Michael Knowles and Matt Walsh, Andrew Klavan. Candace Owens used to be on there, obviously. And the way that Andrew Klavan just sucks up to Ben Shapiro, it's so obvious what's happening. He's just trying to get on Ben Shapiro's good side to not get fired from the Daily Wire or get more money. Because I don't think anybody really watches Andrew Klavan, right? Like, I've never found anyone who watches him actively in the current day. So maybe he has to do that in order to stay on at the Daily Wire, keep collecting paychecks. I don't know. But the guy was like daily posting videos about Candace Owens, taking one tweet and just running with it and calling her anti-Semitic and all these different things, saying that she hates Ben Shapiro's favorite group of people. And it doesn't add up. Like when you watch it, he can spin it in a way that if you haven't looked at the information yourself, if you didn't see Candace Owens in context say what she said in the clips that Andrew Klavan's showing, if you didn't look at all the replies and why Candace Owens is saying certain things on Twitter, Andrew Klavan did a good job of spinning those things into making Candace Owens look like a lunatic, 100%. And then you watch Candace Owens explain herself and it's like, oh my God, dude, how is Andrew Klavan the one that gets to stay on and Candace Owens gets fired? Candace Owens gets to smear articles written about her, paid for by Ben Shapiro, by the way. How does this make any sense? It just doesn't.
Talk about black gang violence the entire time today on my show. I was talking about Lil RT and how he's going to end up in prison. But for some reason, Jewish people think that they're just like in a special category where you're just not allowed to ever allege that they were in gangs, even though there's nonstop evidence in American history that Jewish gangs did exist. And they had a ton of power. You know, you can go back to Prohibition. You can go back to the Jewish gangs that, you know, were quite literally the Jewish Defense League that were putting bombs under people's cars. So to say that you can't imply, and it wasn't even me who implied, by the way, I was actually going back historically and talking about what Michael Jackson was implying as I was reading Diddy docs and saying that we keep hearing this allegation that's being made in Hollywood. To say that you don't have a right to even imply there's a Jewish gang is just a nonsense. If I have a right to imply there are black gangs and talk about black gangs, I certainly have a right to say that there are Jewish gangs and imply that there could be a Jewish gang.
I'm not saying you don't have a right or a legal right to say these things, but
Yeah, he's not saying you have a right, but he is saying that if you do say that, you're going to get fired, get smear articles written about you, and get called an anti-Semite, which nowadays is like a death sentence until that term loses its meaning, just like all the other istophobes have. And if you're not allowed to say these things, and I'm not saying, look, I have to say this, okay? I'm not saying there's some dark force, magical force looking over all of us, and as soon as you say something that isn't super positive about Ben Shapiro's favorite people, you just get poofed into non-existence or anything like that. But I am saying that there's obvious pushback whenever you say one little negative thing about Ben Shapiro's favorite people, and with any other group of people, you can joke about them, you could say racist things, and it's no problem. But with that certain group of people, you can't say anything. Now, imagine when you take that, and you think about what Thomas Massey has been saying to Tucker Carlson and these other guys, imagine all of these politicians that run our country have people from AIPAC that Ben Shapiro hates the term handler. Let's just say babysitter. They sit next to these people. They have their phone numbers. They know, like, they go eat lunch with them all the time and everything. And they basically call the shots, you know? Thomas Massey said, whenever they're trying to make important decisions, a lot of people will often say, let me go talk to my AIPAC guy. And that's obviously run by, it's obviously run by Ben Shapiro's favorite people. Now, if we're not allowed to say anything even slightly negative about those people, imagine you're a politician and you're getting endorsed, and 99% of the candidates that they endorse or something like that gets elected, hypothetically, obviously in a hypothetical world, guys, get elected, and you have a babysitter. So if you say anything that you're not supposed to say, they know about it. And if they find out that you said anything that you're not supposed to say, they're not going to endorse you, which 99% of their candidates, hypothetically, win their election. So if you don't get endorsed by them, you're not winning. So you guys can see what I'm saying. Like, we can't even say anything as independent creators that's negative about them, slightly negative about them, just telling the truth without getting bad things happen to us. Imagine if you're someone who's in Congress or a politician at all who gets endorsed by these people and got your position because you got endorsed by these people. Or you're someone like Thomas Massey, and there's been a lot of crazy stories coming out about him recently. If you guys haven't checked that out, make sure you go check out what's happening with Thomas Massey. But he had to sit down with Tucker Carlson. He exposed a lot of things going on, a lot of the corruption. And it's not just the right with AIPAC, it's also the left with China and a lot of foreign entities as well, possibly even AIPAC over there too. Who knows? But it's not, a lot of the politicians, all the politicians basically are completely sold out to someone or another. And, this conversation for Amy Kozak to act like it's nonsense what's coming out of Candace Owens' mouth, for Andrew Klavan and Ben Shapiro to act like this is nonsense, whenever we just have so much overwhelming evidence that it's not nonsense. You know, what good is Thomas Massey going to get out of lying to Tucker Carlson about APAC babysitters? What good is he going to get out of that? There's nothing good. What good is Candace Owens going to get out of getting fired from the Daily Wire in order to just ask a few questions? Obviously, she's not going to make more money after losing a paycheck, a guaranteed paycheck every month. She's not going to make more money. I guess it's possible, but it's not probable. She's taking a pay cut on purpose for a reason, you know? And it's because she's seeing things that are very obviously happening in front of her, and she's not scared to call it out. And we need people like that on both sides. I'm making videos about Anna Kasparian on the other side that's going through the same thing. Anna Kasparian is going through this wake-up call of like, oh my God, wait, Kyle Rittenhouse shouldn't be guilty. Oh my God, a lot of things that happened in 2020 was absolutely wild. And now she's saying that on her side, and she's getting ostracized for it. There's tons of people calling for her to get fired from the Young Turks, and she's like almost the face of the Young Turks nowadays. Same thing with Candace Owens. You're not allowed to criticize Ben Shapiro's favorite people on the right. But Candace Owens did it, and she's getting ostracized for it. She's getting smear articles written about her, and all these things happening. Let me know in the comments what you think about what Candace Owens and Amy Kozak had to say in this little debate clip. I thought it was really great from Candace Owens, and obviously not so great from Amy Kozak. But let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking about this whole Candace Owens versus Amy Kozak situation.